Hello, Montrose. Welcome to Motown Knows, a podcast where we invite guests to have conversations about your community here in Montrose. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And every other Thursday, you can sit with us here at 6 p.m. You can watch us as we live stream on Neighbor, YouTube, and Facebook. I'm your host, Justin Tubbs, and I'm excited to have three guests with me today to talk about mental health, as September is Suicide Prevention Month, as well as National Recovery Month. Today we have Laura Byard, the Clinical Director with the Center for Mental Health. I have Blaine Hall, the Chief of Police with the Montrose Police Department. Matt Smith, Montrose Police Commander. And with the Montrose County School District, I have Megan Farley, the Threat Assessment Coordinator. Thank you all for joining us and helping shed some light on a really important issue. If you have any questions during the broadcast, or if there's anything you want to touch on, head to Neighbor, that's nabur.montrosepress.com, and you can comment there. That's for those in the audience. As always, I want to give big thanks to Delta Montrose Electric Association for sponsoring this podcast and making it possible for us to all come together today. I'm just going to jump right into it. I want to get this conversation started off with just a general question for everyone, and that is, what does suicide prevention look like for us here in Montrose? What are the successes, as well as maybe what are some of the gaps? And we'll go around the table and just start with you, Laura.
Absolutely. First of all, Justin, thank you for having us. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to talk about this important topic in our community. Suicide prevention takes a lot of different roles, and it takes all of us. Being in a rural community, we are used to depending on each other, and I think this is one of those topics where we really need to work together in order to protect our community and to keep our friends and family safe. So suicide prevention, just like preventing any other medical condition, takes knowing what to do. It takes talking and reaching out to your loved ones. It takes asking questions. It takes persuading people to get help, and then connecting them with individuals who can help them and assess them and make sure they're okay, and then get them treatment if needed. So that's what suicide prevention looks like in our community, and I'm excited to talk more about it tonight with you guys.
Absolutely. And Blaine, what does it look like from the police department's perspective, sort of helping suicide prevention in our community?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, from the police department's perspective, we're one cog in the entire community wheel, focusing on suicide prevention. And from our standpoint, really, it comes down to knowing when someone is in crisis so that we can respond, and really pulling down, I think, some of the stigmatism of how law enforcement responds, interacts with individuals in crisis. So I'd love to talk tonight about some of the training that our police officers go through to help talk with people who are in crisis. And then certainly we can also discuss our mental health co-responder program and partnership with the Mental Health Center, and how that has really increased our ability to respond to people in crisis in our community.
Great, thank you so much. And Megan Farley with the school district, what does suicide prevention look like at Montrose County School District?
Yeah, so I'm so excited to be here. We actually have a threat assessment program this year. It's been there about 3 years. This is my first year doing it, but threats includes threat to yourself, to hurt yourself, and we have a suicide risk assessment program where students can access through a counselor, or another student could tell a counselor that they were worried, and there's a process that goes along with that to make sure that those students are safe in and outside of school when it comes to suicide.
Absolutely. To sort of get started here, I have a question specifically for you, Laura, if we could go back to you. And that is, what are some of the demographics that put people at suicide, maybe at risk of suicide more than others? What are those sort of threatened communities, if we have any here in Montrose?
Sure, that's a great question. So there are folks that are at higher risk. Folks in our LGBTQ community, our middle-aged and senior males, farmers and ranchers are at higher risk. our veterans, of course, adolescents in general. But I would like to say, I guess, with that, there's really no one type of specific person. Suicide can occur in anyone at any age, regardless of their associations, their economic status. It could happen at any time. And so wanting to make sure, while there are some groups who are at higher risk, that we are very aware that it could happen and be a concern for anyone.
Sure, absolutely. What do you think our community is doing to try to maybe reach some of those at-risk demographics? I mean, I know you mentioned farmers and ranchers, for instance. That's an interesting one. Maybe most people don't know about, but can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the center is offering a couple courses that I'd really like to highlight. One of them is QPR, which is a short 90-minute class that you can sign up for. So that's one of the things we're offering for the community. So you can take that class, and that class will help you learn how to have the conversation if you're concerned about someone. So if you see a friend of yours, a neighbor, someone who's been down, just off, not themselves, this is a course that would help you know how to have that conversation. And then another one is Mental Health First Aid, which is an amazing course to really learn more about mental health. Just like most of us have had first aid at some point in our lives, mental health first aid is equally as important, and it helps us take care of each other. So that's one of the things we're doing to just really reach out and empower our community. You had mentioned gaps earlier, and I feel like that's an opportunity. We really need each other, and we need, as a community, for everyone to know what to do so that we can touch everyone.
Yeah, you're talking about a specific program there. What are some of your other spaces or programs that you have for people in Montrose?
Absolutely. So you just showed an image of our crisis walk-in center. So that's the equivalent of mental health urgent care, right? So you would know what to do if someone was having chest pain. So our crisis walk-in center is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. You can call our support line, or that's our lobby. Thank you that you're putting up. It's a beautiful facility. So sometimes people have in their mind what a mental health center might look like. This is what ours looks like here in Montrose. It opened in the fall of 2019. And so now we have locally an opportunity to, for anyone, any age, to walk in 24 hours a day and get an assessment with a clinician. So if you don't know what to do, or you're not sure what to do, what you can do is get your friend, get your loved one to our facility so that a clinician can then support you in figuring that out.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to Blaine and Matt for a minute. And I was going to ask, what is the police department's role in assisting with mental health calls? And how are your officers trained to handle those situations where you maybe respond to somebody who is having a mental health crisis?
Matt, you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Blaine. So thanks for that question, Justin. It's a good one. So for us, when someone's in a mental health crisis, that call can come in a variety of different ways. And as such, our response can be tailor fit to a variety of different situations. No one situation is going to be the same. But from the very moment we get a call, we're assessing information as it comes in so we can better make the community safe and that person who's in crisis safe. And if there are people immediately around that person, we want to make sure they're safe too. So I think the key for us is assessing what information is available to us and determining what best course of action we can use to provide that public safety for that person in crisis and the people around them. Now, I do know that Chief did talk about the stigma surrounding someone or mental health crises. And I think from an outside perspective, when we respond, it may look to the community like this is a criminal nature because we're police. But oftentimes people in mental health crises are not committing a crime. So it's important for us to remember that and recognize that as we work through these calls and use what resources are available to us to help that person and help them get into that frontline intervention that they need to get help.
Sure. Can that be challenging when maybe you do get a call? What does that look like with a conversation with the dispatcher, for instance, and how do you make sure you kind of know what you're going to?
Sure, that's another good question. A lot of times the people that make calls, whether it's a person self-reporting or someone observing something or a family member, may not be equipped or capable in that moment to give the best information. So we really do rely on our dispatchers to do a great job, and they do, at collecting the most pertinent information for us so that we can be safe and we can make sure those people who are making the call are safe as well. So as we get that information, sometimes it may not be accurate when we get on scene, but that's when we do slow things down and develop our own information so we can make correct decisions for public safety.
Sure. And how important is it to train officers to basically practice what you just said?
It's critical, and I'll let Blaine talk a little bit about some of the training that our officers receive. But knowing our resources and knowing what our role is in that moment, because it can change dramatically from second to second, is critical. Being able to de-escalate things is also critical. Making sure that we're not creating our own exigency and really doing our best to slow things down is also very, very fundamental to keeping people safe in this particular type of call. We do recognize too that sometimes things do change, so we also have to balance overall public safety and personal safety as well as officer safety during these calls. So you can see it can be pretty dynamic, but our officers do have very, very good training at helping them make the right decision in those dynamic times.
Sure. Blaine, you want to talk about training a little bit?
You bet. I think there's a national conversation going on right now about the role law enforcement should take in these types of crises. And Matt was exactly right that slowing a situation down and de-escalating it rather than escalating it is so important to keep in mind when we respond to these. I was actually one of the first officers to be sent to what's called crisis intervention training. And that was all the way back in 2003. So the Montrose Police Department has been training our officers really for the last 18 years on how to respond and how to speak with, how to develop a rapport with individuals who are in crisis. And this training is, I would have to say, one of the best, if not the best, trainings in the nation for trying to teach law enforcement officers what a special circumstance this is. And it's a 40-hour training. This group hires actors who are specifically trained themselves in how to exhibit signs of a person who may be in crisis due to depression, possibly someone who's exhibiting autism, someone who may be bipolar or schizophrenic, and then specifically what strategies our officers can use, how we talk, how we stand, how we communicate, and specifically our nonverbal cues, our body language, so that we do everything we can to de-escalate that situation rather than escalate it. And it's really come to the point here within the last few years where if someone is in crisis and we are unable to get a hold of them, whether that be via phone or some other type of communication device, and we know that they are inside of their home, we're not rushing in. We're not going to escalate that situation. We're not going to use officers in that situation to potentially force a violent confrontation. And at the end of the day, we walk away. But with one caveat, we have a program which our former police chief Tom Chin started with the mental health center, and it's called the mental health co-responder program, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about that.
Yeah, what it comes down to, and if you want me to talk about that right now, I can.
Yeah, please.
Okay. And Laura, certainly chime in if I'm missing something. But this was a program that was started, I think, back in 2018. It takes a very special individual to fill that role. It's an individual that holds a counseling degree, but rides with our police officers on a daily basis. And actually now that program has expanded and is now also embedded there with the Montrose County Sheriff's Office. So the police department and the sheriff's office share that resource, and that individual builds relationships with our police officers. And then when we have someone in crisis, we have that individual as a resource to not only help our police officers build a rapport, possibly see things that we're not trained to see or that we, never considered in that type of situation, and we address that person in crisis jointly. Then, when we're successful at convincing, oftentimes, that person to consensually get treatment or ask for treatment, then that co-responder can essentially take that person from there and provide them the resources that they need at that time. Then follow up with that person or hand that person off to the correct resources so that they get the help that they need. Laura, do you have something you want to add there?
Sure. I love this program. It's an amazing partnership between the center and our local law enforcement. We've learned a tremendous amount from law enforcement. They're amazing at how they interact with our community, so we're very grateful to partner with them. But yes, Blaine's exactly right. Chief Hall described it well, and our goal is just to support individuals. So if they've called 911 because of a mental health crisis, we get the best services and the best care to them as quickly as possible, and help law enforcement get back to the next thing that they need to do, and we continue to take care of the individual. So it's a really great partnership, and provides that great care. And then we can support individuals later on, the next day or the following week, if there's something that caused that crisis, that we can help support them in getting taken care of so that they don't have another crisis.
Real quick, one of the final caveats of that program is that here about a year and a half ago, the police department applied for a grant through the state of Colorado to actually get the co-responder their own vehicle. I would love it if there was a day that came where someone who was in a mental health crisis, once they decided that they wanted to cooperate and get help, that they didn't go in the back of a police car. Because that's that whole stigmatism around separating the stigma of criminality versus the stigma of someone who needs help, and we want to provide that. And so with that co-responder, now we have a vehicle that is not a police car that that individual can be transported into the hospital or to the walk-in crisis center so that they can get the assistance they need without being put in the back of a police car and having that maybe extra stigmatism.
Right. Do you guys have any maybe specific success stories just off the top of your mind? Obviously not using names or anything, but that you can think of?
We've had a ton of success. We've been able to connect a tremendous amount, about a third of people with mental health services. And so that's amazing. And many of them are doing really well right now. So yeah, I would just share that this program has helped make a difference in a number of lives.
Great.
And I would have to say too, I think some of the best success stories are when we're collaboratively able to help children, kids, and we have a great partnership with our school district too, and that, I think those of all of them for me is really meaningful.
That's a good segue, actually, because I was going to go to Megan next at the school district. And I was going to ask you, how does the school district handle cases where a student might come to a teacher and express that they maybe want to cause harm to themselves?
Yeah. So if that were to happen, that teacher's going to send the child to the counseling office or to an administrator in the building. That won't matter if they're a kindergartner or a senior. That process stays the same, and the counselor or the administrator, which would be your principal or your vice principal, is going to administer a risk assessment specifically for suicide. It's a form. It has direct questions for that person to ask so that they know where they're going with this. It's not like a freelancing thing that they have to figure out. And then they can consult with me. We have a mental health specialist inside of the school too, like that's a district person. They can consult with her. They can consult with my supervisor, Jim Pavlich, and kind of make a decision. If they decide that this is like something that needs further attention, they can call the Center for Mental Health Crisis Unit. Those folks can come to the school. They can take them to the crisis center if the parents are willing to do that. So that all of those issues are being handled right there. And then when students return from a crisis situation, we build support plans with them to make sure that they have safe adults that they can talk to. There's also therapists embedded into the school district this year, so students can get mental health treatments in school as well. So those referrals are coming from counseling offices. We're really just trying to cover all of our bases here and really looking at getting kids what they need.
Sure. First, I wanted to ask if is staff at the school required to report something like that? If
Yeah.
a student comes to them? Yes. Okay. And then you were talking about how there are therapists on campus, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Well, they're district people, but yes,
Okay.
they can bring them onto campus. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And how has that been for students? Has it been a program that's been utilized a lot?
So that one's brand new too.
Yeah.
So those numbers are coming.
Right.
I think it's being well used right now. And yeah, I mean, we just are excited about serving kids exactly where they need to be served because they are with us all day. And this is where they have access to services.
Absolutely. Kids have gone through a lot in the past year and a half, being separated from friends, going from remote learning to in-person learning, things like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the school district has sort of approached mental health and its students when it comes to, COVID and maybe feelings of isolation, things like that?
Sure. I think it's coming down to exactly this program that I'm talking about, that we're assessing kids for risk of suicide. Also, though, if they're coming in saying, I'm not suicidal, but I really want to talk to somebody about my feelings of feeling anxious, because I'm here, because I wasn't here, or I'm feeling overwhelmed. Again, that's going to be a referral to those therapists that are now embedded within our district to really start talking with kids. Those don't have to be coming from the suicide risk assessment. Those people are available to talk to kids about anything that they're feeling about being in school.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk a little bit about Safe to Tell. I was wondering if, and this is for those who don't know, this is it's for Colorado schools. It's an anonymous reporting service where people can report any number of things, from somebody wanting to harm themselves to somebody wanting to cause harm to other people. And it's completely anonymous, so students don't have to feel threatened if they are coming forward making a claim that maybe they're afraid to talk about. So talk about Safe to Tell and how it's been utilized, or if it has, when it comes to mental health crises.
Yeah, Safe to Tell is a pretty cool program. It gives an alert almost immediately to key people within the district that need to know, along with, we have school resource officers who get that information. And then we share it with the school. So when it comes to a threat to themselves, we're going to, like our school resource officer or our partnership with the police department or sheriff's office is, we might end up knocking on somebody's door saying, hey, is everybody okay here? And then following up the next day if it's after school hours, or we'll pull the child to the counseling office and go through the processes that we have.
Sure. I'm going to open this next question to everybody. But what specifically is Montrose doing? And that could be from the city's perspective, from the Center for Mental Health, or from the school district. What is Montrose doing to reduce